This is every level of Stranger Things, Monster Explained. Level 1. The Upside Down doesn't need teeth to kill you, because it's got something way more efficient built right into the environment itself. Vines and spores are the bottom feeders of this nightmare dimension, but calling them harmless is like calling quicksand a minor inconvenience. These things are everywhere, coating every surface, floating through every breath of toxic air, functioning as the hive mind's immune system and early warning network rolled into one disgusting package. Will Byers learned this the absolute worst way possible when he got infected and turned into a living spy camera for the Mind Flayer. The vines didn't just wrap around him and squeeze, they hijacked his entire nervous system and made him a mole without his knowledge or consent. Later seasons showed us victims cocooned in vine nests, slowly being drained or prepped for something even worse than death. But here's what doesn't make sense. If vines are just dumb environmental hazards, why do they coordinate? Why did they release Will at exactly the right moment in Season 1? Keep that question locked away, because the answer doesn't show up until Level 6, and it'll make you question whether Will ever actually escaped. Level 2. Demobats are what happen when evolution takes a wrong turn into pure nightmare territory and decides that bats need to lose their eyes, gain razor-sharp teeth, and develop a taste for human flesh that borders on obsessive. These aren't your standard flying rats that eat bugs and avoid humans. They're coordinated pack hunters that attack in swarms, dense enough to block out light and strip victims down to bone in under 5 minutes if you're unlucky enough to get caught alone. The demobats mobbed him in seconds, latching onto every exposed piece of skin and dragging him down through sheer numbers and coordinated weight. Eddie took dozens of them down with him, but the swarm just kept reforming and pressing the attack like a living cloud of teeth and hate. His sacrifice gave Dustin the window he needed, but it proved beyond any doubt that raw numbers and coordination beat individual heroism every single time when you're facing hive mind-controlled predators. Vines can't chase you, but they don't need to, because what comes next evolves specifically to hunt anything the vines miss. And there's footage from Season 5 showing these things using tactics that shouldn't be possible for creatures without higher brain function. So either the show is lying about how smart they are, or something else is thinking for them. Level 3. Pack tactics meet adolescent predatory rage in the form of demodogs, which are basically teenage demogorgons with all the speed and bloodlust, but none of the restraint or durability that comes with full maturity. These four-legged nightmares hunt in tightly coordinated groups, using actual teamwork to corner prey and overwhelm defensive positions through flanking maneuvers and synchronized attacks. Season 2 made them the primary physical threat once the Mind Flayer decided that subtle possession tactics weren't producing results fast enough, and direct assault was the superior strategic option. The shift from psychological horror to outright warfare happened when these things burst onto the scene in numbers that made conventional defense basically impossible without psychic intervention. Dart was the gateway into understanding this entire species, starting as this seemingly harmless slug that Dustin found in his trash and decided to keep as a weird science project. Watching him evolve from cute polywog to full-grown killing machine across several episodes was like observing a time-lapse nature documentary, except the subject could rip through reinforced steel by the end. At first, he just ate the family cat, which was traumatic, but manageable. Then he started growing legs and developing proper teeth, and suddenly, Dustin had a baby dinosaur in his basement that could easily tear through human flesh. The Demodog massacre at Hawkins' lab represents peak Season 2 chaos, and remains one of the most brutal action sequences in the entire series. Bob Newby had just finished his hero moment rebooting the facility power and making it to the lobby with safety literally in sight when the pack burst through reinforced windows like furry missiles programmed for maximum carnage. They tore through armed security guards in seconds flat, treating military-grade body armor like it was tissue paper that barely slowed their momentum. But there's something the show keeps hiding about Dart. He chose Dustin over the hive mind for exactly 3 seconds before falling back in line. That moment of choice matters more than you think. Because if demodogs can override commands even briefly, what happens when something way higher up the chain decides to override its programming? What makes demodogs significantly scarier than their fully grown adult counterparts is the pack mentality and how it multiplies their effective threat level exponentially. A single demogorgon is a boss fight that requires planning and serious firepower to overcome, but a coordinated pack of demodogs is basically a small-scale war that needs military-level response. They flank from multiple angles angles. They coordinate timing on simultaneous strikes. They dig underground tunnel networks to attack from completely unexpected vectors. Demodogs hunt in packs because they're weak alone. But Season 1 showed us a single Demogorgon operating solo and nearly winning. So here's what doesn't add up. Why would a weaker creature need backup while a stronger one works alone? The answer isn't about strength, it's about purpose. And that purpose reveals which monster was really in control the entire time. Level 4. The original nightmare that launched this entire franchise and kickstarted the mystery. The adult Demogorgon is what happens when you take a great white shark, cross it with a Venus flytrap, and give the resulting abomination the ability to tear holes between dimensions like it's ripping through wet paper. Tall enough to tower over grown adults, strong enough to drag people through walls, and equipped with a face that opens into the world's most horrifying flower of teeth and hunger. Season 1 built this creature as an unstoppable force of nature that didn't need personality or complex motivation to be absolutely terrifying. It was pure apex predator operating on instinct, hunting by blood scent like a shark tracking wounded prey across miles of ocean. Creating temporary portals through solid matter, like physics, was just a polite suggestion it chose to ignore. The way it would simply appear out of nowhere, ripping through reality itself to grab victims, made every location feel equally unsafe, regardless of locks or walls or distance from known entry points. The final confrontation at Hawkins Middle School remains one of the best monster fights in television history, specifically because of how it balanced spectacle with emotional weight. 11 versus the Demogorgon. Pure psychic power against raw physical strength and dimensional manipulation. She'd been dodging and evading it all season, using clever tactics and misdirection to stay alive. But this showdown forced her to go completely nuclear and sacrifice everything to protect her friends. What the show eventually reveals across multiple seasons is that adult Demogorgons are middle management in the Upside Down's command structure. They're strong, but not particularly strategic on their own. Powerful, but not intelligent enough to adapt tactics or learn from failures. They're meant to function as shock troops and heavy hitters, the biological equivalent of tanks that soften up targets and break through defenses before more dangerous threats move in to finish the job. The fact that it took 11 operating at full power to kill one establishes their durability pretty definitively. Regular human weapons barely slow them down. You need sustained fire, high explosives, or concentrated psychic blasts to even make a dent in their biology. Conventional ammunition might wound them, but won't drop them fast enough to prevent casualties, which is why the body count jumps dramatically whenever one gets loose in a populated area. The Dead by Daylight crossover made the Demogorgon a playable killer with unique mechanical abilities that translate the show's creature into asymmetric horror game play surprisingly well. It can place portal nodes around maps and teleport between them for map pressure. It hunts primarily by sound rather than sight, which forces survivors to play more carefully. And it can shred through defensive positions with powerful claw attacks that break pallets and generators. Playing as the Demogorgon gives you this interesting perspective into how it thinks and operates as an ambush predator. You're constantly targeting wounded or isolated survivors, using portals to cut off escape routes and force survivors into dead ends, applying pressure through unpredictable positioning. It's a perfect mechanical translation of the show's creature into a completely different medium. Here's the disturbing part nobody talks about. Every Demogorgon we've seen has acted differently. Season 1's was patient and calculating. Season 3's was mindlessly aggressive. Season 4's was almost robotic. 3 different behavioral patterns from supposedly the same species. Either the writers forgot their own lore, or each Demogorgon was being piloted by something that wanted different results. And if you think the answer is the Mind Flayer, you're 2 levels away from the truth. Level 5. Pure body horror reaches its absolute peak with the Spider Monster, a writhing amalgamation of melted human tissue and liquefied rats sculpted into a giant biomechanical nightmare that moves like an enormous spider. Season 3 went completely off the horror deep end with this abomination, showing exactly what happens when the hive mind decides simple possession isn't producing fast enough results and starts building custom bioweapons from scratch using whatever raw materials are available. The creation process is disgusting on a level that goes way beyond typical monster violence. Billy and dozens of other flayed victims spend weeks systematically hunting people around Hawkins, dragging them to the abandoned steel mill and melting them down into raw biomass biomass, while they're still conscious and aware of what's happening. Not killing them mercifully first, and then processing the bodies, literally melting living people, and adding them to a growing pile of sentient flesh. The screaming alone should have alerted the entire town that something catastrophically wrong was happening. But the Mind Flayer kept everything coordinated and quiet until the final reveal. By the time the party actually realizes what's building in that factory, there's already a mountain of human sludge growing larger by the hour, and taking on a definite shape with purpose behind every movement. When the spider monster finally reveals itself at the hospital while hunting Nancy and Jonathan, it's nightmare fuel condensed into physical form, stalking them through narrow corridors, smashing through walls like they're cardboard, regenerating damage by absorbing nearby rats, and incorporating them into its mass. The tentacles move with this awful tasting motion, constantly searching the air for chemical traces of victims to grab and consume. Watching it chase them up stairwells and through parking garages, while knowing that this thing used to be dozens of living people, adds genuine tragedy underneath the terror. These aren't random cells or mindless biomass. They were individuals with lives and families who got melted down and repurposed as living weapons. The psychological horror of that concept hits way harder than simple monster violence ever could. The Starcourt Mall finale is where the spider monster goes full kaiju and stops pretending to be subtle. It bursts up through solid ground, tentacles spreading everywhere, trying to kill Eleven because the hive mind has identified her as the single greatest threat to its invasion plans. The Mind Flayer is directly piloting this monstrosity, using it as an enormous hand to crush the party like insects before they can interfere with the gate opening. When it stabs Eleven's leg and plants a piece of itself inside her flesh, that's psychological warfare taken to its logical extreme. Not just trying to kill her outright, but infecting her with trackable biomass, attempting to monitor her location through the embedded fragment. The fact that she has to dig it out of her own leg with her bare hands in one of the most visceral scenes in the entire show speaks to how personally invasive this level of threat becomes. What separates level 5 from everything below it is the strategic intelligence and adaptation on display. Lower tier threats operate mostly on instinct or basic pack tactics, but the spider monster shows actual planning and real-time tactical adjustment. It specifically targets Eleven while using other party members as bait and hostages. It reforms and regenerates after taking massive damage that would kill lesser creatures. It pursues objectives with single-minded focus that ignores self-preservation. The scene where Jonathan douses it in gasoline and lights it on fire, watching it burn while it just keeps advancing without slowing down, proves that conventional weapons have become completely useless at this power tier. Only severing the Mind Flayer's direct connection through gate closure actually stops it. Everything else just buys time and causes temporary inconvenience. But here's where it gets weird. The spider monster had one job: kill Eleven. Instead, it infected her and tried tracking her. Why wound when you can kill? Why tag when you can destroy? That decision cost the Mind Flayer everything, unless killing her was never the actual goal, unless someone higher up needed her alive for something specific. Hold that thought, because the creature at level 6 will make that infected leg wound make horrifying sense. The spider monster seemed unstoppable until it made a tactical mistake that a hive mind shouldn't make. It chose infection over execution. That wasn't strategy, it was programming. And the only creature with enough intelligence to program that kind of restraint used to be human. But here's what'll keep you up at night. What if he still is? Level 6. Henry Creel represents the transitional phase between gifted human psychic and interdimensional overlord, existing in that horrifying middle ground before his full transformation into Vecna. This level is all about understanding the origin story, watching how a kid with frightening natural abilities went from family annihilator to architect of an entire hive mind system. Understanding Henry is absolutely critical to understanding everything that happens afterward, because he's the one who actively shaped the Upside Down from random chaos into a coordinated weapon. The Creel family massacre in 1959 was Henry's first real public demonstration of what his powers could accomplish when fully unleashed. Methodically snapping bones, gouging out eyes, arranging the crime scene to look supernatural enough that the whole town immediately blamed demons or occult curses instead of considering human agency. Victor Creel went straight to the psychiatric asylum for a crime he didn't commit. Henry got quietly transferred to Hawkins' lab, where Dr. Brenner could study him, and the government got their hands on a child who could kill people with directed thoughts. The Season 4 flashbacks show young Henry as deeply creepy but externally controlled, hiding his true nature behind a carefully practiced smile and helpful demeanor. He didn't just have psychic powers, he had a complete philosophy justifying their use. The speech he gives about humanity being a mistake and apex predators deserving to rule without moral constraints is a full supervillain manifesto, delivered with complete sincerity and conviction. What sets this level distinctly apart from everything else is the human element still present and visible beneath the monster. Henry, as number one in the lab, could pass for relatively normal when circumstances required it, working as a seemingly friendly orderly and carefully manipulating Eleven into removing the Soteria chip that kept his powers suppressed. He's coldly strategic, incredibly patient, willing to wait literal years for exactly the right moment to strike with maximum impact and minimum risk. The Rainbow Room Massacre, where he systematically kills every other test subject, remains one of the most efficiently brutal sequences in the entire series. He's not angry or frenzied, he's methodical and precise. Crushing spines, exploding heads, painting walls red without breaking focus or showing the slightest hesitation. The level of control he demonstrates over his abilities while murdering children is somehow more disturbing than raw violence would be. The final confrontation between number one and young Eleven is what directly creates Vecna as we know him. She manages to overpower him at the last possible second and banishes him by literally punching him through dimensional barriers, smashing him repeatedly into the Upside Down, where he lands broken and dying. The transformation sequence that follows is body horror elevated to art. Vines immediately crawl over his shattered body, fusing with exposed flesh, rebuilding him into something that transcends human biology entirely. The skeletal appearance, the grotesquely elongated hand, the exposed muscles and visible tendons, all direct products of the Upside Down, remaking him as its avatar and central nervous system. This level represents the bridge between purely psychic abilities and total dimensional control. Henry could kill individuals with focused thought. Vecna can kill reality itself and reshape entire dimensions according to his will. The first Shadow stage play expands significantly on young Henry's early connection to Dimension X, showing how he encountered the proto-form of the Mind Flayer as a child and became utterly obsessed with its power and potential. That initial contact planted seeds for everything that follows, making him uniquely suited to not just survive the Upside Down, but actively dominate and control it. He didn't stumble into power. He was systematically prepared for it across decades. But the first Shadow revealed something the show keeps dancing around. Young Henry heard the Mind Flayer whispering to him for years before Eleven banished him, which means either Henry shaped the Mind Flayer or the Mind Flayer spent decades shaping Henry. The show wants you to believe the first option. Season 5 is about to prove the second, and if that's true, then Vecna isn't the villain. He's the puppet who thinks he's the puppet master. Henry Creel was containable, physical, theoretically killable. What he became transcended all those limitations. But here's the question nobody's asking. Why does Vecna need to kill using trauma? Why not just snap necks from a distance like Henry could? The answer reveals something about what the Upside Down actually did to him, and it's way worse than just giving him power. It made him dependent on something he can never have enough of. Level 7. Vecna represents the absolute apex of Upside Down threats, combining overwhelming psychic domination with legitimate physical presence and strategic intelligence that spans dimensions. He doesn't just kill you through brute force. He invades your mind, dredges up your worst memories and deepest traumas, then uses them to systematically break you from the inside out before snapping your body like a puppet whose strings just got cut. Season 4 introduced him as the hidden big bad who'd been pulling strings and orchestrating events since the very beginning, completely retconning the Mind Flayer from ultimate evil overlord into a shaped tool that Vecna created and controls. The reveal recontextualizes everything that came before and establishes that every major threat and incident traces back to one incredibly patient and vengeful consciousness. The curse mechanic represents psychological warfare perfected into an actual murder weapon. Vecna carefully selects victims based on unresolved guilt and psychological trauma, specifically targeting people who are already broken enough to be vulnerable to mental invasion. He appears in their waking visions, forces them to relive their worst failures and sins, and when their mind finally shatters under the weight, he snaps their physical body in a specific sequence designed for maximum horror. Bones break one after another in deliberate order, eyes explode from internal pressure, limbs twist at angles that shouldn't be anatomically possible, all while the victim floats helplessly in the air. Chrissy, Fred, Patrick, Max, each death was a carefully orchestrated public execution designed to open dimensional gates and spread existential terror through the community. The ritualistic nature of it, the precision and consistency, shows a level of sadistic control that goes way beyond simple violence. What makes Vecna fundamentally distinct from every other level on this list is how deeply personal he makes every kill. He talks directly to his victims, explains his entire philosophy, makes them understand exactly why he's decided they deserve to die. The extended monologues in the Mindscape are genuinely chilling because Jamie Campbell Bower sells the character as someone who completely believes humanity is a plague that needs systematic culling for the greater good. He's not mindless or operating on instinct. He's ideological and philosophical. Every kill serves a greater purpose by opening another gate. Every gate brings the dimensions measurably closer to merging. Every merge gets him closer to fundamentally reshaping reality according to his vision. The Creel House becomes his throne room and command center, a permanent nexus between worlds where he hangs in meditative stasis while controlling the entire hive mind network. The vines coating every surface are direct extensions of his nervous system, giving him sensory input from across the dimension. The Demobats roosting in the attic serve as personal guards and rapid response units. The mindscape he creates looks like a twisted nightmare version of Hawkins, with all his victims trapped as permanent prisoners in his mental palace, unable to escape or die fully. When the party finally tracks him down and launches their coordinated assault, he fights back with everything available. Telekinesis to throw people around like dolls, illusions to disorient and separate the group, direct mind invasion to exploit individual fears and weaknesses. Nancy gets hit with her worst nightmare scenarios. Steve nearly gets strangled by animate vines. Robin almost falls into an endless void. Max's desperate sacrifice play, using music as a psychological anchor, is the key to understanding Vecna's core weakness. Strong positive memories and genuine emotional connections can disrupt his curse, pulling victims back to physical reality before he finishes the kill sequence. Kate Bush's running up that hill becomes a literal lifeline as Max's love for her friends overpowers Vecna's trauma exploitation. He eventually gets her during a second attempt, but not before she escapes once, proving definitively that he's not completely invincible or unstoppable. Here's the reveal that recontextualizes this entire ranking. Vecna shaped and controls the Mind Flayer. Vecna directs all the Demogorgons. Vecna commands the vines and spores. Every single death since season 1. Barb in the pool, Bob at the lab, Billy at Starcourt, Eddie in the Upside Down, all of them trace back to him as the ultimate source. He's not just one monster among many. He is the monster wearing 7 different faces and coordinating every attack. The season 4 finale, where Nancy, Steve, and Robin hit him with Molotov cocktails, while Eleven fights him simultaneously in the Mindscape, shows exactly what it takes to even temporarily hurt Vecna. Sustained fire, high explosives, and the world's most powerful psychic all attacking at once. And he still survives the encounter. He falls out of the Creel House, burning and broken, lands hard in the Upside Down below, and the vines immediately start healing and rebuilding him because the hive mind literally cannot let him die. The VR game lets you actually play as Vecna, controlling monsters and invading minds from first-person perspective. You select victims by reviewing their memories. Identify which traumas to weaponize for maximum psychological damage. Watch them break in real time. It's deeply uncomfortable, but shows how he thinks, treating people like chess pieces in a game only he fully understands. The power fantasy feels real until player-controlled heroes show up and remind you that even gods can bleed when enough pressure gets applied. Here's what breaks the whole story. Vecna tells Max he became this to remake humanity, but every single kill opens gates. Every gate makes the Upside Down stronger. Every stronger Upside Down makes Vecna weaker relative to it. He thinks he's building an empire. He's actually feeding something that's getting ready to digest him. And Season 5's title sequence already showed us what's been waiting in Dimension X for him to finish the job. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the 7 levels of Stranger Things monsters, click the subscribe button.